Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer here, and a quick take to end your week. And we're talking, of course, about the war that Israel has just launched against Iran. Lots of things to talk about. First, perhaps most importantly, is the role the United States has and has not played. They were fully aware that these attacks were coming down the pike earlier in the week. It looks to me like at least since Monday. And that's why the U.S. embassies all nearby were forced to remove all non-essential personnel, Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, etc., anything basically within Iranian range of missile strikes. And that should have made it fairly clear to everyone that there was a likelihood of imminent strikes, though not to the extent that the Israelis launched. But again, Trump could have done a lot to push back. He didn't have to provide operational intelligence. He could have made this public. He could have said, I don't want it to happen. He didn't do any of those things. He gave, at very least, a blinking yellow light, if not a direct green. And so the U.S. continues to be, and Trump continues to be, by far the strongest supporter of Israel in the world. Now, Trump, of course, has wanted to be a peacemaker. He's wanted to end wars. He's not been effective at doing so with the Russians. Quite disappointed in the fact that the Russians haven't been willing to come to the table and accept a ceasefire, even as the Ukrainians are. Hasn't been successful with the Iranians. He had made some progress. The likelihood of a deal was looking like it was going to be much smaller. It was going to require the Americans to accept at least near-term enrichment until some consortium of external powers was put together that had not yet been defined. Trump was getting irritated with that. He was getting impatient with it. He didn't want this to go military. He clearly, one of the reasons that Mike Waltz was removed as national security advisor was less about Signalgate, which was really a Pete Hegseth Secretary of Defense problem. It was more about the fact that Waltz was pushing so hard to move towards support for a war against Iran and Iranians' nuclear capabilities. And, there you had a lot of John Bolton vibes that Trump did not like at all. And so he was more willing to push him out and now appoint him as ambassador to the UN. That's the backdrop of what here happened. I will say that I'm really surprised that, given how this was telegraphed, that the Iranians were caught so flat-footed. That they were doing their plans, of course, but certainly military leadership should have recognized that there was imminent danger to them, and so they should have been taking precautions, not meeting together, been in more secure sites. And of course, that wasn't true at all. And a fair amount of Iran's top military leadership has been decapitated by Israel. And so that's a big deal. It's a huge success for the Israelis, much as we saw against Hezbollah. And just as everyone thought Hezbollah was the strongest military that wasn't attached to a state in the world, and so Israel needed to be careful, and it turned out Israel actually had the cards, had the military and intelligence capabilities. It looks like the same thing is true now for Iran, a lot bigger, a lot more capable, a massive military, a large country with a lot of money, and yet operational incapacity in dealing with the Israelis. And so they've gotten themselves blown up. This is yet one more example of the world turning towards what I call a GZERO environment, a lack of global leadership, a law of the jungle, where the strong do whatever they want and the weak suffer what they must. And in the context of the Middle East, the Israelis are strong. And they can call the shots against the Palestinians, and people will complain, but no one will really do anything. They can call the shots against Hezbollah, same. And they can call the shots against Iran. And the Americans have been very supportive in the aftermath, in the first hours. So too the French, so too the Germans. The Gulf states have been critical. Russia has been critical. It'll be interesting to see if anything's going to happen. I think the one place that you could see some real direct response from a third party is Turkey, because Erdogan, who's never had a good relationship with Netanyahu, and of course has been on the other side of Gaza and the humanitarian challenges and all the rest, could easily decide to put significant sanctions, boycott, the rest on business with Israel that would have an impact on the Israeli economy. But that's about all I see from third parties. I don't see the UAE cutting off relations with Israel. I see Gulf states only wanting more cooperation with Israel's incredible military and intelligence prowess. So that's the near term. Now, what is Iran going to do here? And it seems to me that there are three bad scenarios that are plausible and certainly much more likely in the near term than they were 24 hours ago. The first is that Iran tries to make a dash for nuclear weapons. I mean, the Israelis were involved in these strikes by themselves. As of right now, there have been no Israeli attacks on Fordo, which is this major nuclear enrichment and research site, infrastructure site. It is deep underground under a mountain. The Israelis don't have the military capabilities to hit it themselves. The Americans have not provided those capabilities. And if the Iranians wanted to take their highly enriched uranium and nuclearize, they could do so within a matter of weeks, 8, 10, 12 weeks. Doesn't give them a nuclear bomb that they can deliver, but does make them more dangerous. Now, if they were to do that out of desperation, the Israelis and the Americans would likely find out, and the likelihood that the Americans would get directly involved in the war and expand it is almost certain in that environment. So a really bad scenario for Iran and very escalatory. That's one possibility, out of desperation. Another, out of desperation, would be to disrupt the Straits of Hormuz, where so much of the world's energy, not to mention chemicals and other shipping, comes through. If that were to happen, oil prices for a period of time probably double, 120, 140, 150 or more. That's also essentially a declaration of war against the Gulf states. It's one of the reasons the Gulf states have publicly come out against these attacks and supporting Iran. But again, if they do that, that brings the Americans into the war. It brings the Gulf states into the war. It cuts off all of Iran's funding and their economy, really destabilizes them. So it's something you only do out of desperation. Now, they're clearly going to be far more desperate, and so that makes it more likely than it has been. Let's hope it doesn't happen. That would bring the world into a global recession. And then the other thing that could happen is, with Iran showing itself to be so desperately incompetent, the potential for major social unrest in Iran is also going up. But Iran has far more military capabilities, a better fed, a better armed, a better paid domestic repressive mechanism than Bashar Assad has had. And so if that were to occur, the most likely outcome would be brutal repression that would keep the regime for now intact and would lead to the deaths of thousands and thousands of Iranian civilians. So pretty lousy outcomes. Fortunately, all of those are tail risks. They're things that are more likely now, escalation much more likely now, but not super likely. And there's virtually nothing Iran can do against Israel. Yes, they're going to launch ballistic missiles. They've already launched drones, and the vast majority of them will get knocked down. And so Israel certainly is vulnerable to some attacks that'll be fairly indiscriminate and may well kill Israeli civilians, but nowhere near the level of damage that Israel can and has done to Iran. And that's one of the reasons, the principal reason why Netanyahu felt like he could get away with this, the impunity that he is presently facing. And so if there's a good scenario, and I think there is a baseline good scenario, it's that not much happens. Oil prices spiked on the strikes, but have already come back a fair bit because that's what the markets clearly expect right now. That in other words, Iran is like Hezbollah here, that they really don't have any good options. And so they don't do much at all. They make some strikes, but they don't really matter. It's closer to the non-response after, in Trump's first administration, he ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And Iran was all fire and brimstone, but couldn't do anything. And that means they get weaker over time. And they're less capable of promoting terrorism and exporting it. And they're less capable of terrorizing their neighbors. And maybe over time, they're less capable of brutally repressing their own people. That's certainly what we have to hope for in this environment. It's very fluid, lots going on, and that's where we are. So I hope everyone's doing well. We'll keep following this very closely, and I'll talk to you all real soon.